Known to be the inspiration for the character Lorelei Lee, famously played by Marilyn Monroe in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Miss Peggy Hopkins Joyce Monet Easton Mayer, also known as the original gold digger, was so infamous in the 1920s for marrying millionaires that the word gold digger was invented in her honor. She was one of the first sex symbols of the 1920s and received a total of more than 50 marriage proposals. Some of the men she rejected committed suicide. She eventually married 5 millionaires and had affairs with more than 100. She famously said, and I quote, "True love was a heavy diamond bracelet, preferably one that arrived with its price tag intact," end quote. She lived a life of so much luxury and at one point owned one of the most expensive diamonds in the world, the Portuguese diamond, which is currently on display at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. But in the end, she died broke and in a lot of debt. Today, we will be looking at the life and times of America's original gold digger, Miss Peggy Hopkins Joyce. Marguerite Upton, also known as Peggy, was born on the 26th of May 1893 in Berkeley, Virginia, to Sam and Dora Upton. Her father Sam was a barber and her mother Dora was a housewife. Sam and Dora got divorced and Peggy moved with her father to Farmville, a small rural town in Virginia, when she was 10 years old. Peggy hated living in Farmville. She hated being the daughter of a barber. She didn't want to live a boring and poor life. She had big dreams and she was determined to achieve them. So she ran away from home at the age of 15 with her new boyfriend, a Vanderbilt cyclist who she knew was her only ticket out of Farmville. The new couple were on a train to Denver, Colorado when Peggy met millionaire Everett Archer. Peggy quickly dumped her cyclist boyfriend and married Everett. However, 6 months later, Everett discovered that Peggy had lied to him about her age and she was actually underage at the time, so he annulled the marriage. Peggy later claimed she initiated a divorce because life as a millionaire's wife was boring and not what she thought it would be. But she would end up pursuing and becoming involved with several millionaires in the next 2 decades of her life. Using the settlement money she got from Everett for the annulment of their marriage, Peggy enrolled herself in the Chevy Chase School for Girls in Washington, D.C. While in school, Peggy met her second husband, Sherburne Hopkins. Sherburne was a lawyer and the son of one of the most prominent and wealthy lawyers in the United States at the time. Peggy got married to Sherburne on the 1st of September 1913 at the age of 20, 3 years after her first marriage. This new marriage would last for 3 years, and in 1917, Peggy left Sherburne and moved to New York City to pursue a career in show business. She got her first job in the entertainment industry as a Ziegfeld showgirl. Her job was basically to serve as eye candy rather than being an actual performer. She also dabbled into acting, appearing in a few movies, but she wasn't a very good actress and received very terrible reviews from critics, with some calling her talentless. But Peggy wasn't entirely talentless. She had the talent of attracting wealthy men with her adoring gaze and inviting smile. In 1919, Peggy met her third husband, multimillionaire James Stanley Joyce, during a film production in Chicago. Stanley Joyce was a very successful lumber baron from Clinton, Iowa, and had a net worth of $40 million, which is approximately $665 million in 2022. On their first date, Stanley gave Peggy an emerald necklace, and Peggy wrote in her journal, quote, "Really, it was very nice of him. Of course, I would rather have had a diamond, but anyway, I suppose emeralds are worth a little money," end quote. On their next date, Stanley gave Peggy a railroad car and a platinum watch. After a few dates, Stanley Joyce proposed to Peggy and they made plans to get married. But at that time, Peggy had not gotten divorced from her second husband, Sherburne. So Stanley Joyce, who was very much in love with Peggy, paid for Peggy to get divorced from Sherburne. Peggy and Sherburne's divorce was granted and finalized on the 21st of January 1920. And 2 days later, on the 23rd of January 1920, Peggy got married to her third husband, multi-millionaire James Stanley Joyce. From the minute they got married, Peggy began extorting money from Stanley Joyce. Firstly, on their wedding night, Peggy locked herself in the bathroom of their hotel room and refused to come out until Stanley wrote her a check of $500,000, approximately $8.3 million in 2022. Next, she discouraged him from buying a yacht, saying it was a waste of money, and convinced him to buy her a $300,000 pearl necklace, approximately $5 million in 2022. She also went on a honeymoon shopping spree and spent $1 million in a single week, which is approximately $16.7 million in 2022. Less than a year into the marriage, Peggy left Stanley Joyce and began an affair with French multi-millionaire newspaper owner Henri Letelier. She then sued James Stanley Joyce for a divorce and demanded an alimony of $10,000 monthly, which is approximately $166,000 monthly in 2022. And she also demanded that he pay her lawyer fees of $100,000, which is approximately $1.7 million in 2022. When Stanley realized that Peggy had sued him for a divorce, he countersued and filed for a divorce from her. He stated that she only married him to defraud him of money and accused her of having multiple adulterous affairs while they were married. He also accused her of being the reason an army lieutenant committed suicide. Stanley's lawyer claimed that the soldier shot himself after going broke, trying to keep Peggy happy. The scandalous nature of the divorce made Peggy a local celebrity and a tabloid sensation. The divorce was highly publicized, and there were more than 4,000 newspaper articles written about it in the spring of 1921 alone. During the divorce trial, it was revealed that Stanley Joyce had given Peggy jewelry worth $1.4 million, approximately $23.3 million in 2022 during their marriage. He also bought her a $300,000 home in Miami, which would be approximately $5 million in today's money, and gave her numerous cars and real estate properties. Despite all the evidence that Peggy truly defrauded Stanley Joyce of money and had multiple adulterous affairs during their marriage, she still won in the divorce court and was awarded $600,000 in the divorce settlement, which is approximately $10 million in 2022. She was also awarded stock in Stanley's lumber company that will pay her an annuity of $1,500 every month for the rest of her life. That's approximately $25,000 every month for the rest of her life in 2022. And lastly, she was allowed to keep all the jewelry, cars, and real estate properties he had given to her during their marriage. After Peggy's divorce from Stanley Joyce, tabloids began reporting that she had married her French millionaire boyfriend, Henri Letelier. But Peggy quickly shut down the rumors, claiming she didn't marry Henri because, quote, French men understand women too well. A girl should never marry a man who understands women. After her third divorce from Stanley Joyce, Peggy declared that she would never marry again. In 1922, William Errázuriz, a Chilean diplomat who Peggy began an affair with at the same time she was having an affair with Henri Letelier, shot himself in her hotel room on the 1st of May 1922 when she rejected his marriage proposal. William, who was already a married man and had a child at the time, died from his injuries the following day. 3 days later, Peggy accidentally overdosed on sleeping pills and was rushed to the hospital. When she woke up, Peggy told reporters that William was the only man she ever loved. She also confessed she toyed with him, saying, quote, I played with him, I dangled him on a string, just as I did many others. Oh, why did I do it? End quote. When the reporters asked her why numerous men were so fascinated by her, Peggy replied, saying, quote, I don't know why men run after me. I cannot tell you the secret of my fascination, but I never meant to ruin their lives. End quote. 6 days later, another Chilean diplomat who Peggy was also having an affair with, Lieutenant Rivers Montt, was found unconscious. He He tried to take his own life by overdosing on sleeping pills when he discovered through newspaper reports that Peggy was not in love with him, but rather she was in love with William. He was found unconscious, clutching a newspaper article of the interview where Peggy declared her love for William. The suicide of William Errázuriz, an attempted suicide of Peggy and Lieutenant Rivers Montt all happened in a span of 9 days. Her scandalous divorce a few months earlier, plus her numerous affairs and the fact that men committed suicide and attempted to commit suicide because of her, made Peggy an instant international celebrity, and she became famous for simply being famous. She was one of the first women in America to be famous for simply being famous, and this was almost a century before Kim Kardashian, reality stars, or internet celebrities. Tabloids loved her, the public could not get enough of her, and she was one of the most written about women in the American press at the time. Peggy was enjoying her newfound fame. She loved the spotlight and never refused an interview. She often received reporters in her bedroom and would wear sheer negligee and sans undergarments throughout the interview. In the 1920s, this was happening in the 1920s. She was receiving reporters in her bedroom and she was wearing underwear. That in itself caused a lot of scandals. Peggy made no apologies for using her physical assets to gain a life of luxury. She famously said, quote, "I may be expensive, but I deliver the goods," end quote. And, quote, "better to be a mercenary than miserable," end quote. For the next few years, Peggy stuck to her promise of never getting married again. She remained single, but continued to have numerous affairs with wealthy men, some of which include, I may mispronounce some names, so I apologize in advance. Let's get into it. W. Averell Harriman, a politician, businessman, and son of a railroad baron. Prince Christopher of Greece and Denmark. Hiram Bloomingdale, the son of Lyman Bloomingdale, a very successful businessman and philanthropist. Sayajirao Gaikwad III, sorry if that was not the pronunciation, the Maharaja of Baroda State, who gave Peggy a priceless ruby necklace. And Irving Thalberg, who is often referred to as the greatest movie producer in the history of American filmmaking. Peggy also had a highly publicized affair with Charlie Chaplin, who was a comic actor, filmmaker, and one of the most popular figures of the 20th century. The stories Peggy told Charlie about her life and marriage to Stanley Joyce were the basis of his movie, A Woman of Paris, which is considered to be his greatest artistic achievement. Peggy also had an affair with theater owner and producer Lee Sherbert, whose family, the Sherbert family, was responsible for the establishment of the Broadway district in New York City. There were also rumors that she had an affair with King Gustav VI of Sweden, and he bought her a villa in the south of France. Every single one of Peggy's affairs were highly publicized and made tabloid headlines. But just 2 years after declaring she would never marry again, Peggy got married for the 4th time to Gustav Moner, a Swedish count, on the 3rd of June 1924. Peggy told the press, quote, "All my other marriages meant nothing. This is the first time I have ever been truly in love," end quote. And her new husband, Count Moner, proudly told reporters that Peggy gave up her career in order to be his wife. But a month and a half later, Peggy decided to resume her career and left Count Moner. They got divorced 2 years later in February 1926. After the divorce, Peggy remained single for the next 19 years, but continued having numerous affairs with wealthy men. In the early 1930s, Peggy began an affair with multi-millionaire automotive titan Walter Chrysler, who was the founder of the American Chrysler Corporation. At the time of the affair, Walter was a married man and a father of 4 children. He gave Peggy jewelry worth $2 million, which is approximately $33.3 million in 2022, including a 134-carat diamond necklace that cost $500,000, approximately $8.3 million in 2022. And he also bought her 2 Italian luxury cars that cost $45,000 each, which is approximately $748,000 each in 2022. The affair ran its course and eventually came to an end. Peggy had her peak in the 1920s. She was a constant hot topic for gossip and was one of the most talked about women in the world. But by the end of the decade, she began losing her relevance. 1929 was the beginning of the Great Depression, which was the longest and most severe depression ever experienced by the industrialized Western world. And people had more important things to worry about other than Peggy and her next social exploit. Wealthy men were also having a hard time economically and no more cared about her. Peggy, who relied on men for her income, was running low on cash and began selling pieces of her jewelry for money. Desperate for money, she began writing, and in 1930 published her memoir titled Men, Marriage and Me by Peggy Joyce. In it, she wrote, quote, "True love was a heavy diamond bracelet, preferably one that arrived with its price tag intact." End quote. She also wrote, quote, "Deep inside me, ever since I was a little girl, I have always wanted nice things and luxuries and love, and I suppose once or twice I have said to myself, why be beautiful if you can't have what you want?" End quote. In 1933, Peggy released another book, a novel titled Transatlantic Wife, but it received very negative reviews, with one critic calling it excruciatingly awful. Seeing that she had no future in writing and still desperate for money, Peggy tried acting one more time and starred in her final movie titled International House, where she plays herself and makes fun of her gold digger reputation. By then, she was almost 40 and her looks had faded. She had added a bit of weight and was said to be sloppy and unkempt. Her lack of millionaires and mounting debt turned her into an alcoholic. She became rude and aggressive and was known to get into fights, occasionally throwing a punch or two. She tried returning back home to her family, but they didn't want anything to do with her. People were no longer interested in her and she became yesterday's news. She became a laughingstock and her name was used to describe an empty-headed, promiscuous gold digger. In 1937, Peggy began a relationship with Charles Vivian Jackson, a British astronomy professor. He proposed to her with a £6,500 sapphire ring, which is approximately £500,000 in 2022. At the time, he was still legally married and claimed he was hoping to get a divorce soon so he could marry Peggy. A month later, Charles died in a sleighing accident when he and Peggy were on vacation in St. Moritz. After his death, Peggy claimed he was the only man she ever loved. 8 years later, on the 4th of December 1945, Peggy got married to her fifth husband, Anthony Easton, a British consulting engineer. The wedding made headlines because Peggy refused to include the word obey in her marriage vows. Her fifth marriage once again ended before 1953. And in 1953, Peggy got married to her sixth and final husband, Andrew C. Mayer. Peggy claimed he was a retired official of the Bankers Trust Company, but in reality he was just a regular bank teller or bank cashier and had met Peggy while he worked in the bank that she used. The couple would remain married until Peggy died from throat cancer on the 12th of June 1957 at the age of 64. Her death didn't make the news, and the Toledo Blade newspaper, one of the few newspapers that wrote an obituary for her, wrote, "She collected men, chinchilla and diamonds." End quote. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.